Hi, my name is Kristen Danson. I live at 6801 Bright Star Lane. I also own the property next to me at 6805. I've been there for 16 years. I'm on 2.5 acres. My house, my last appraisal was approximately $650,000. At this point, I'm assuming my property is definitely going down. This past summer and fall, I have hardly been able to use my pool on the weekends, my grill, my gazebo, and my 2.5 acres, because all it is a bunch of noise coming into my backyard. Now, where a lot of people, because I'm on the most eastern side of Hill Country Estates, it is now in my home. The sound has continued to go up. I have been woken from my master bedroom because of the sound. It sounded like my alarm clock was going off. My office, which I primarily work from my house, when they're doing sound checks in the afternoons, is extremely disruptive in my home. And you know, I have 2 Great Danes. One of them will not even leave my porch to go outside because she's afraid that there's people in my backyard. That's how loud the sound is. So if this is a religious practice, my question is why is the city enabling this religious practice to be forced into my home? Because that's what this is. This is my home, and I've been there for 16 years. I'm asking you to please make this right.
All right, thank you.
My question is, why was the neighborhood not involved in the crafting of the restrictive covenant?
I could not say whether my staff was not influenced or not by what the neighborhood said.
I still feel like the neighborhood was left out of those discussions.
I don't believe that they were in a discussion where each word was negotiated.
One of their worship models, or one of their outreach models, is to reach people that might not come to church but would come to a concert, an outdoor entertainment, and through that they're able to then pull them into the fold and speak to them in a meaningful way. If the avenue for doing that was motocross, to reach the motocross crowd, who may or may not be church going, I don't know, or a NASCAR raceway with a band in the middle, would you consider that to be part of a church regardless of the nature of it?
I'm not sure that I could answer a question.
Owned by the church, used by the church as outreach.
Just because a facility is owned by a church does not mean that it qualifies as a religious assembly. An amphitheater building would be used for a religious assembly use. And that's what I relied on making my determination. And that's how the city approved the site plan and building permits that follow.
And I would agree with my colleague that an amphitheater, by definition, is not a building. But
out in the field.
In this case, but there is a threshold. You can see that there would be a threshold of use that you would probably not consider part of religious assembly, even though they might.
There might be a point where I would have to take a look at that. And that's, if AC/DC we start playing one weekend and Aerosmith the next, and they started basically turning a profit, and that would purely be in a music venue, then I would probably have a change of heart and say that that is not in accordance with being a religious assembly use if it turned into be something other than a religious assembly use. It was basically told to the city and we permitted. So
it's kind of the religious assembly use is the get-out-of-jail-free card for you.
It's how it complies with the code.
Right. Okay.
So, Mr. Guernsey, real quick. So, but this is in a residential area. I mean, isn't there a red flag that goes up? I mean, it's the city that the problem that people have with the city is that the individual's rights seem to be constantly abridged.
The city has every right to regulate things like the decibel levels or the parking on site or whatever else. Like, just because it's a religious assembly doesn't mean that they have a de facto right to do anything and claim that it's worship, right? Clearly, regulating decibel levels is something that's within the scope. And I think that the council later on, following this issue, regulated the amphitheater issue. But we have to deal with the code prior to that. And I just don't see how, right now, what they're doing despite the nuisance doesn't meet the code that was in place at the time.
Well, Commissioner, also decibel level, even though the decibel level is low, in Vietnam, the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong used whistles to blow before they would come on. The whistle's not loud, but you could hear it. You could hear it down through the valley. Is that not right, sir? and it's just a whistle. So this, even though the decibel level, the point I'm trying to make is the reason the decibel level is being maybe measured and okay at the fence doesn't take into account how it carries, how sound actually carries. It doesn't have to be real loud to carry really far. So I think that's the problem we have with that.
Commissioner.
Okay, so I know there's more than one letter in exchange. And I'm not getting on, but there was an exchange to the church saying, hold off on this. We're in litigation. Wait a little bit. If you proceed, you proceed on your own, at your own risk. And the church basically responded back to the neighborhood association saying, we're moving in a timely manner. That doesn't sound very brotherly to me. Okay?
With the neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean word by word, but the people that were going to be most impacted by the conditions that were being put on this site were going to be the neighborhood. And usually when that's the case, the restrictive covenant is something that's agreed to, where at the end sometimes you split the baby, as people say, but that it comes to some sort of agreement on both sides, because there is a very large number of affected parties that live around this church that were going to be affected by this amphitheater. Even if the use is allowed, even if the decibels are right, usually a restrictive covenant is the tool that you bring peace with everybody. And I guess I'm used to seeing the neighborhoods more involved in restrictive covenants than we're involved in this. We usually don't see the applicant writing their own restrictive covenant.
And I don't believe the applicant wrote their own restricted covenant per se. I think that was something that's drafted by our law department, and it was one where this isn't a regular zoning case. There's not a zoning map change to change it from one district to another.
I understand your rationale. I understand the rationale for the subsequent modifications to the code to fix it or to make it right. I just think this is one of those cases. It's just bad from the get-go. I mean, it just seems to be profoundly abridging the bulk of the citizens' rights that are tax-paying citizens around this facility.